My name is Layla Carter, and for most of my life, I believed I had everything figured out. At 47 years old, I had built a life that, from the outside, seemed nothing short of perfect. I was a successful accountant, respected in my field, known for my meticulous work and unwavering dedication. I was married to David, a loving and devoted husband who shared my faith, my values, and my determination to raise our children in the way we believed was right. We had 3 wonderful children, Isabella, 15, Luke, 12, and little Ava, who had just turned 8. We were more than just a family, we were a fortress of faith. Islam was not just my religion, it was my identity, my guide, my foundation. I prayed 5 times a day without fail, fasting diligently during Ramadan, giving generously to charity, and making sure that every aspect of our lives was aligned with what we had been taught was the path to salvation. I had even made the pilgrimage to Mecca, twice, a source of immense pride not only for myself but for my entire community. People looked up to me, not just for my discipline but for my devotion. I had a voice that could recite the Quran with a beauty that often brought people to tears. I was frequently asked to lead gatherings, to teach children the sacred verses, and to guide women in deepening their faith. It was my honor, my calling, my purpose. And yet, beneath it all, buried under years of routine and outward certainty, there were moments of doubt, small, fleeting, yet impossible to ignore. I never dared voice them, not even to David. I was a woman of faith, wasn't I? A leader in my community. A pillar of righteousness. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, when the house was dark and still, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and wonder. How could a merciful God condemn good people to eternal suffering just because they weren't Muslim? Why were women worth less in inheritance, in testimony, in authority? I knew the answers. I had been taught them since I was a child. God's wisdom is beyond human understanding. We are not to question, only to obey. And yet, the doubts lingered. Small but persistent, like a thorn I couldn't quite remove. One evening, my daughter Isabella came to me with a question that pierced straight through my carefully built walls. "Mama," she said softly, her wide brown eyes filled with uncertainty. "Chloe's my best friend. She's kind, she's generous, but she's not Muslim. If she's a good person, why would God send her to hell?" The words made my heart clench. I had spent my life answering questions of faith with confidence. I had taught classes, given lectures, corrected misunderstandings. But at that moment, staring into my daughter's innocent, searching eyes, I faltered. "It's about faith, sweetheart," I finally managed. "No matter how good a person is, if they do not follow the truth, they cannot be saved." Even as the words left my lips, they felt hollow. I had repeated them countless times before, yet now, for the first time, I heard them differently. They felt cold, rigid, empty, as if I were trying to convince myself as much as her. Isabella frowned, her young mind wrestling with the idea. She opened her mouth as if to ask something else but then closed it, nodding slowly. "Okay, Mama," she said, though the doubt in her eyes remained. I quickly changed the subject, pretending the conversation had never happened, but that night, I lay awake, unable to shake the weight in my chest. What if I had been wrong all along? Still, life went on. The routine kept me anchored. Morning prayers before the sun rose, preparing breakfast, making sure Isabella had her schoolbooks, that Luke didn't forget his soccer cleats, that Ava had brushed her hair properly. "Mom, where's my math notebook?" Luke called from the kitchen. "On the table next to your bag, sweetheart." David kissed me on the cheek before heading out to work, and I smiled, watching him go, grateful for the stability we had built together. By the time I left for the office, the sun was fully up, a rare, golden morning for Seattle, where the clouds usually dominated the sky. A cool breeze carried the scent of freshly bloomed cherry blossoms from the trees lining our street. I inhaled deeply. Blessed. That was what I was. Blessed. As I drove to work, the Quran played softly through my car speakers, the familiar verses washing over me like a protective shield. Faith was my anchor. It had always been. But lately, it felt more like a weight. The morning unfolded like any other. The golden light of early spring bathed the streets of Seattle, and the gentle hum of life carried on as it always did. The routine had a way of anchoring me, keeping my thoughts occupied, pushing aside the creeping questions I had spent years suppressing. I pulled onto the freeway, merging into traffic, my mind already drifting toward the meeting in downtown Bellevue. There was a big account to finalize, numbers to verify, clients to impress. It was tax season, and my workload was relentless. The Quranic verses playing softly in my car were a familiar comfort, a soundtrack to my daily life. But today, I barely heard them. My mind was elsewhere, on Isabella's question from the night before, on the uncomfortable hollow feeling that refused to leave me. Chloe's a good person, Mama, why would she go to hell? I turned up the volume, willing the words to drown out my thoughts. That was when I saw it. A large truck, several car lengths ahead, carrying long steel pipes, stacked high and held together by straps that looked frayed, like they had seen better days. A flicker of unease settled in my gut. I instinctively slowed down, putting distance between us. Something about the way those pipes wobbled didn't feel right. I told myself not to be paranoid. Accidents happen to other people, not to me. I had a meeting to get to, dinner to plan, Ramadan around the corner, a million little things demanding my attention. Yet a strange, foreboding feeling curled in my chest. And then, it happened. The truck hit a bump, just a slight jolt. But it was enough. Time seemed to fracture. One of the straps snapped. I saw it happen, saw it as if the world had slowed to an unbearable crawl. The pipes shifted, teetering, gravity pulling them forward in a sickening lurch. No, no, no. I whispered, hands clenching the steering wheel. And then, chaos. A gust of wind caught the loose pipes, hurling them into the air like missiles. One was spinning right toward me. It caught the sunlight, flashing for a split second before slamming through my windshield. Shattering glass. Screeching tires. Metal screaming against metal. The world became a blur of sound and violence. I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. The steering wheel ripped from my grip as my car veered violently. I fought to regain control, but there was nowhere to go. The impact was deafening, a brutal, earth-shattering collision. My body lurched forward, seatbelt biting into my chest. And then, darkness. Not the kind that comes when you close your eyes, but something deeper, heavier, as if the entire world had vanished. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know if I was still alive. I tried to move, to breathe, but there was no body to command, no lungs to fill. It was as if I had been untethered, like a thread suddenly cut from the fabric of reality. And then, a shift. The darkness lifted, replaced by something else entirely. I was floating. Not in the way one might float in water, but as though I were weightless, suspended between two worlds. Below me, a scene unfolded, a horrifying, impossible sight that made no sense. I was looking down at myself. My car was unrecognizable, crushed metal and shattered glass twisted into an unholy wreck. Smoke curled from the mangled hood, and my limp body was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from a deep gash on my forehead. No. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I tried to reach out, to move toward my body, but I had no hands, no arms, no form at all. I was simply there. Watching. Sirens wailed in the distance. A man, the truck driver, stood nearby, hands gripping his head, his face a mask of horror. Oh my God. Oh my God. I didn't see her. Paramedics rushed in, their voices sharp and urgent. Female driver, mid-40s, severe head trauma, no pulse. No pulse. The words slammed into me like a punch to the chest. No, I'm here. I wanted to scream. I'm right here. But no one heard me. No one even looked up. I wasn't there. Not to them. A suffocating panic wrapped itself around me. This was wrong. So wrong. Was this death? No, that wasn't possible. I had a life. A family. David. Isabella. Luke. Ava. My kids, oh God, my kids. A sob built inside me, but there were no tears, no voice, no breath. Just raw, crushing dread. I had to go back. I had to wake up. But then, the light came. Soft at first, almost like a flicker in the distance. Then it grew, stretching, expanding, until it was all around me. The light wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt, something that wrapped around me, pulling me in, surrounding me with a warmth that was both terrifying and, strangely comforting. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It didn't burn. It was alive, almost breathing, and I was drifting toward it without effort, without resistance. A part of me wanted to fight it, to struggle against whatever this was, to wake up. I needed to get back to my body, to my family, to my life. But another part of me, a deeper part, knew there was no turning back. I was crossing a threshold, and everything I had ever believed about life and death was unraveling before me. This isn't happening. I clung to the words like a lifeline, repeating them over and over, willing myself to wake up, to feel my body, to hear the beeping of a hospital monitor, to smell antiseptic and plastic for tubes. But there was nothing. No weight of my limbs. No sound except the slow, rhythmic hum of something beyond my comprehension. And then, I wasn't alone anymore. A presence emerged from the light, vast and immeasurable, yet gentle and intimate. I didn't see a face, didn't hear a voice in the way I understood voices, yet I knew, it saw all of me. Every thought. Every action. Every hidden doubt I had buried for years. And with that realization, something inside me broke. A wave of emotion crashed over me, guilt, fear, awe, love, all blending together in a way that made no sense and yet felt more real than anything I had ever known. Who are you? My thoughts formed the question, but there was no need to speak. This presence already knew. I expected judgment. I expected fire and condemnation, for my flaws and fears to be thrown back at me with unrelenting force. But instead, there was only love. A love so overwhelming, so pure, it felt as though my very soul was being laid bare, not to be punished, but to be understood. Memories rushed through me, not as flashes, but as something deeper, richer. I was experiencing my life all over again, but this time, through the eyes of something greater than myself. I saw my childhood, the first time I had ever prayed, the feeling of wanting so desperately to be good enough for God. I saw the moment I put on my hijab for the first time, feeling pride and devotion, believing it was a mark of righteousness. I saw my marriage, the love I had for David, the quiet sacrifices we both made to build a life that honored God as we understood Him. But then, I saw something else. Something I had never let myself see before. I saw the fear that had ruled my faith. How I had followed every rule, every ritual, not out of love but out of terror, fear of being wrong, fear of punishment, fear of eternity in hell if I strayed even the smallest step. I saw my arrogance, the way I had dismissed the beliefs of others, convinced that my path was the only path, that I had the answers and they did not. I saw Isabella's face, the doubt in her eyes when she asked about her friend Chloe. Why would a good person go to hell, Mama? I had told her what I thought was the truth. But now, standing here, in this presence, in this light, I knew I had been wrong. My throat tightened. Shame gripped me. I didn't know, I whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't know. The light swelled, and within it, I felt something that made me tremble down to the core of my being. Forgiveness. Not just acceptance, but true, unshakable forgiveness. Tears. If I had a body, I would have wept. The weight I had carried for so long, the fear, the doubt, the desperate need to be worthy, was slipping away, dissolving in the presence of something far greater than I could ever comprehend. And then, I saw him. A figure stepping forward, emerging from the brilliance. Not just a man. Not just a prophet. I knew him instantly, even though everything I had been taught had told me otherwise. It was Jesus. But not the Jesus of Islam, the Isa I had grown up learning about, the prophet, the wise teacher. No. This was something entirely different. He radiated an authority I could not question. A truth that was undeniable. And yet, the moment his eyes met mine, all I felt was love. Not a distant, conditional love. Not a love that had to be earned through rituals and sacrifice. A love that already was. A love that had always been. My legs, if I had them, would have collapsed beneath me. Because in that moment, I knew. Everything I had believed, everything I had built my life around, was about to change forever. I stood before him, Jesus, and every part of me shattered. Not because of fear. Not because of condemnation. But because, in his presence, every lie I had built my life upon fell apart. There was no debate, no theological argument, no carefully crafted justifications. Just truth, unfiltered, undeniable, and utterly inescapable. I had spent my entire life believing I knew God. I had devoted myself to rituals, prayers, fasting, every act meant to prove my worthiness, to secure my place in eternity. But standing here, before him, I realized, I had never truly known him at all. A deep, searing pain tore through me, not physical, but something worse. A pain of the soul, of realizing that everything I had clung to was nothing more than dust. I wanted to fall to my knees, but I had no body. I wanted to beg for forgiveness, but Jesus's eyes told me something far more devastating. He already knew. He had always known. Every doubt I had buried. Every quiet, unspoken question I had been too afraid to voice. Every moment when my heart had whispered, "This isn't right," and I had silenced it out of fear. He had seen it all. I didn't know, I choked out, my words thin, broken, desperate. I didn't know, Lord. I thought I was following the truth. The weight of my own voice crushed me. Because I wasn't just confessing to him, I was confessing to myself. Jesus said nothing, but he didn't have to. Because as I stood before him, I saw my life unfold, not in flashes, not in disjointed memories, but as a complete, unbroken tapestry. And I saw the truth behind every thread. I saw myself as a child, eyes wide with faith, eager to please, eager to obey. My heart had been pure then, searching for God, for truth, for love. But somewhere along the way, that pure longing had been twisted into chains, chains of fear, chains of blind obedience, chains of believing that love had to be earned through submission. I saw myself praying, fasting, reciting scripture, each act performed not out of love, but out of duty. Not because I longed to be close to God, but because I was terrified of losing his favor. I saw myself judging others, looking down on those who did not share my beliefs. They are lost, I had told myself. They do not follow the truth. But now, standing in the presence of the very one I had denied, I realized I had been the one who was lost. And then, I saw the worst of it. I saw my children. I saw Isabella, Luke, and Ava, the way I had shaped their faith, the way I had led them to believe in a God of punishment rather than a God of love. I saw Isabella's face when she had asked me about Chloe. Mama, if she's a good person, why would God send her to hell? And I saw the way my answer had hurt her. The way she had wanted to believe in a God who was kind, who was just, who loved goodness, not just those who followed a specific set of rules. But I had taken that hope from her. I had told her, faith is what matters. Without it, even good people will be lost. And now I saw the damage those words had done. Because they were a lie. Not a lie I had created, but a lie I had inherited, a lie I had believed so completely that I had passed it down, embedding it into the hearts of my children. And Jesus let me see the weight of that lie. I saw a future where Isabella grew into a woman just like me, devout, obedient, afraid. Where Luke held on to his faith not out of love, but out of duty, where Ava wrapped herself in the same silent doubts that had once kept me awake at night. And then, I saw something even worse. I saw their end. I saw them standing where I stood now, but instead of light, there was only emptiness. Because I had led them onto the wrong path. No, I sobbed, though no sound left me. Please, Lord, please, let me fix it. I would have given anything to take it back. To go back to that moment in my kitchen, when Isabella had asked her question, and say something, anything, other than what I had said. Let me go back, I pleaded. Please. Let me tell them the truth. Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with something I could barely comprehend, sorrow, love, longing. And then, he spoke, not with words, but with truth that filled every part of me. You have seen. Now you must choose. Choose. I didn't understand. Choose what? I wanted to ask, but before I could, the vision of my children shifted. I saw another future, one where they found him. One where they knew the truth. One where they were free. I reached toward it, toward them, toward him. Please, I whispered, my soul breaking. Please, give me another chance. And in that moment, I knew he would. A violent gasp tore through me. My body jerked, lungs seizing as if I had been dragged from the depths of the ocean, desperate for air. A crushing weight pressed down on my chest, a sharp, searing pain radiating through my ribs, but none of it mattered. Because I was back. I could feel my body again, the dull ache of bruises, the stiff burn in my limbs, the rhythmic beep of monitors piercing through the haze of my mind. My throat was raw, as if I had been screaming, but the only sound that broke the own truth I could no longer deny. Jesus is God. The words ripped from my soul, raw and unfiltered, carrying with them everything I had seen, everything I had learned, everything that had been rewritten within me. A sharp intake of breath came from beside me. I turned, vision still blurry, and saw David, his face pale, eyes wide, gripping my hand so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "Layla," he choked, his voice thick with emotion, relief flooding his features. "Oh my God, you're awake. Thank God, thank God." Tears welled in his eyes, his fingers trembling against mine. But as my words sank in, his relief twisted into confusion. His grip tightened. "What? What did you just say?" My breath trembled. The room around me felt too bright, the edges of reality still blurred. The weight of what had happened, of what I had seen, of what I now knew, pressed against me, suffocating yet freeing all at once. I swallowed, voice hoarse, but unshaken. Jesus is God. A silence thick as stone fell between us. David's face hardened, his brows drawing together in a way I had never seen before. His relief had turned into something else, something dark, unreadable. "Layla," he said slowly, his voice laced with warning. "You're not thinking straight. You've been through something terrible. The accident, the trauma." "No." I cut him off, my voice rising, desperate. Because this wasn't delirium. This wasn't shock. This was truth. I tried to sit up, but pain ripped through me, forcing a sharp cry from my lips. My body felt shattered, stitched together with fragile threads of survival. "Lay back down," David ordered, pressing a firm hand to my shoulder, his concern now tainted with something colder. But how could I be still? I had seen him. I had stood in the presence of the one I had denied my entire life. And now I was here. Back in this fragile, broken body, in a world that suddenly felt so much smaller than the vast, eternal truth I had witnessed. I turned my head, fighting through the dizziness, my eyes scanning the room, the sterile white walls, the four dripping into my arm, the machines tracking my heartbeat. None of it felt real. I had been somewhere else. And now I was here. For a reason. "You don't understand," I whispered, gripping David's wrist, my fingers weak, trembling. "I saw him. I saw Jesus. I was dead, David, I was gone. But he brought me back." David stiffened, his entire body going rigid. "Layla, stop." It wasn't a request. It was a command. I froze, my breath catching at the cold finality in his tone. "You're confused," he continued, his voice low, controlled, but beneath it, there was fear. "You had a near-death experience. That's all it was. Your mind was hallucinating. The brain. No." The monitors spiked as my voice broke the air, my heart hammering against my ribcage. "It wasn't a hallucination, David. I was there. I saw my body, I saw the accident, I saw everything. And then I saw him." David pulled his hand away as if I had burned him. A heavy silence stretched between us. I could see it, the way his jaw tightened, the way his shoulders locked, as if he were bracing for something worse than what had already happened. And then, his expression shifted. Not confusion. Not anger. But fear. "You need to stop this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed, shaking my head, unable to stop the words from pouring out. "David, I was wrong," I murmured, tears burning my eyes. "We were wrong. Jesus is the truth. He's not just a prophet. He is Lord." David pushed back so suddenly, his chair scraped against the floor. His hands curled into fists, his breath shallow, uneven. "Don't say that." "But it's true." "Stop." His voice boomed through the small hospital room, slamming into me like a physical force. I flinched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His chest rose and fell, his hands shaking, his eyes flashing with something I couldn't yet name. Then, without another word, he turned, yanked the door open, and walked out. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone, my body weak, my mind burning with revelation. Tears spilled down my face, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of certainty. I stared at the door for what felt like an eternity. The air in the hospital room felt thick, suffocating, as if the very walls were pressing in on me. David was gone. And deep down, I knew he wasn't coming back. Not the way he was before. A shiver crawled up my spine, not from the pain in my broken body, but from the terrifying reality I had just stepped into. I had spoken the truth, Jesus is God, and in doing so, I had crossed a line I could never uncross. A knock at the door made me flinch. A nurse peeked in, her expression polite but guarded. "Mrs. Carter, are you feeling up to visitors?" I hesitated. "Who?" Before I could ask, the door pushed open wider, and I saw them, 2 men in dark suits, standing stiffly just outside the room. A cold weight settled in my stomach. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice hoarse. The nurse looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and the men. "They said they're from the mosque. Your husband called them." I stiffened. Of course, he did. The moment he walked out that door, I should have known where he was going, to them. To the ones who would fix me. "I don't want to see them," I whispered. The nurse hesitated. "Are you sure?" "They said it was important." "I'm sure," I said, firmer this time. "Please tell them to leave." Her eyes flickered with something, pity, maybe, but she nodded and stepped out. I heard muffled voices in the hallway, low, tense. Then, the heavy thud of footsteps retreating. My hands clenched into weak fists against the sheets. I knew what this meant. They weren't here for comfort. They weren't here for support. They were here to bring me back, to remind me of who I was supposed to be, to tell me this was all a mistake, a moment of weakness, a hallucination. But I wasn't weak anymore. I had seen the truth. And I couldn't keep it inside. The first person I told, outside of David, was Sophia. She sat beside my hospital bed, her long brown hair pulled into a ponytail, eyes full of something between love and fear. "Daddy says you're sick," she whispered. I swallowed hard. "I'm not sick," I said softly. Her fingers played with the sleeve of her hoodie, twisting the fabric, avoiding my gaze. "Then why is everyone so mad at you?" The question hit like a knife. I took a slow breath. "How do you tell your child that the world is about to turn against you?" "Because I told the truth," I said, watching her carefully. She finally looked at me. "What truth?" I hesitated, but only for a second. Jesus is God. Sophia flinched, her eyes going wide. Mama. She whispered, her voice barely audible. I reached for her hand, ignoring the ache in my body. I know it's hard to hear. But it's true. I saw him, Sophia. When I died, I saw him. And he wasn't just a prophet. He was everything. The light, the love, the truth. He is God. She yanked her hand away, eyes filling with tears. Stop it. You're not supposed to say that. My heart broke, but I didn't back down. Why not? I asked gently. Because. She shook her head furiously. Because it's wrong. Is it? I asked. She didn't answer. But I saw the confusion, the war in her mind. She had been raised to believe one thing. But now, her mother, the woman who had taught her to pray, to recite scripture, to live in obedience, was telling her something completely different. It didn't make sense to her. I love you, I whispered. And I need you to know that I would never lie to you. Not about this. I saw him, Sophia. I saw Jesus. And he loves us more than we could ever understand. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the tile floor. I have to go. Sophia. But she was already at the door. I love you, I called after her. She paused, just for a second. Then, without turning around, she pulled the door open and slipped out. And I was alone again. The news spread quickly. David told the community leaders. The whispers turned into cold stares, then into open hostility. People stopped visiting. My closest friends, women I had prayed with, fasted with, wept with, vanished from my life overnight. The messages started small, texts, missed calls. Then they became warnings. Sister, you are being deceived. This is the devil playing tricks on your mind. Come back before it's too late. And then, the threats. You are a disgrace to your family. If you do not recant, you will be cut off. You know what happens to apostates. The day I was discharged from the hospital, I returned home to find David had moved my things into the guest room. I stood in the doorway, staring at my suitcase, at the empty space where my life used to be. You've left me no choice, he said from behind me, his voice cold, unfamiliar. You're not the woman I married anymore. I turned to him, tears burning my eyes. I am, I said. I'm just finally free. He shook his head. No, he said simply. You're lost. And with that, he walked away. I didn't follow him. Because for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. I had been cast out, abandoned by the world I once knew. But I had something greater. I had the truth. And I wasn't going to keep it to myself. The first few nights in the guest room were the hardest. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house that no longer felt like home. The faint hum of the refrigerator. The distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The muffled voices of my children in their rooms, so close, yet so unreachable. David barely spoke to me. Sophia wouldn't even look at me. Luke avoided me, and little Ava, sweet, innocent Ava, watched me with wide, uncertain eyes, as if she couldn't recognize her own mother anymore. I had lost them. And yet, I couldn't turn back. I had seen Jesus. I had stood in his light, felt his love, and learned the truth that had been hidden from me my entire life. How could I stay silent? Even if it meant losing everything. I started small. At first, it was just writing. I opened an old journal and poured out everything I had experienced, the accident, the moment my soul left my body, the overwhelming peace and love that had met me in the light. And Jesus. The way he knew me, saw me, and yet loved me without conditions. I wrote until my hand ached, filling page after page, until my doubts, fears, and grief had no choice but to pour out through the ink. But writing wasn't enough. I needed to speak. I needed to tell someone. I tried to reach out to old friends, people I had trusted for years. Women who had prayed beside me, who had wept with me in times of struggle, who had once called me their sister. "I need to talk to you," I texted one of them. "It's important." The response came an hour later. "I heard about what you're saying. Layla, please, just stop. Don't throw everything away for this. You're being deceived." Another friend blocked my number. One by one, they disappeared. I had been part of a community so deeply intertwined, and yet, with a single declaration of truth, I had become an outcast. But Jesus was still with me. And he led me exactly where I needed to go. It happened through a single email. "Layla, I heard about your story. I need to talk to you. You're not alone." It was from a woman named Angela, a stranger to me, yet her words carried something that felt familiar. I hesitated. Could I trust her? Was this a trap? But deep down, I knew, I had nothing left to lose. I replied. And the next night, I met her and others like me. They called it a house church, but it wasn't like any church I had ever seen. No grand building. No pews. No stained glass windows. Just a small living room, filled with people who had once stood exactly where I was now, abandoned, cast out, rejected for choosing Jesus over everything else. Angela greeted me with a warm smile, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks, understanding. "You're safe here," she said softly. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. They let me tell my story, and as I spoke, I watched their faces change. Some nodded, others wiped away silent tears. "I had the same experience," one man whispered. "I was raised just like you. But then I saw him. And everything changed." Another woman reached for my hand. "You're not alone, Layla," she said. "We're your family now." A lump formed in my throat. Family. I had lost one, but maybe God was giving me another. As weeks passed, my fear began to fade. Because for every person who rejected me, there were others who listened. Others who were searching, who had spent their entire lives bound by fear, by rules, by the crushing weight of a faith that never felt like love. I started sharing my story online. At first, it was just a simple post. I died. And when I came back, I knew the truth. Jesus is God. I didn't expect much. Maybe a handful of people would read it. Maybe no one at all. But within days, it spread like wildfire. Hundreds of comments. Then thousands. Some were angry. "You're a liar. You're a disgrace. You should be ashamed. You're going to hell for this." But others were different. "I've always had doubts. Tell me more. I had a dream about Jesus once. I've never told anyone. I think I'm ready to know the truth." people were listening. And I knew this was why Jesus had sent me back. Not to be silent. Not to live in fear. But to speak. To share what I had seen. To set others free. I still missed my children. Every night, I prayed for them. God, please. Open their eyes. Help them see you like I did. Don't let them be trapped like I was. I didn't know if they would ever accept the truth. But I trusted Jesus. Because he had found me, even when I wasn't looking. And I believed, one day, he would find them too. Until then, I would keep speaking, keep writing, keep telling the world what I had seen. Because now I knew. Once you've met Jesus, you can never go back. I sat alone in my small apartment, the soft glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The silence was thick, pressing against me, yet it no longer carried the same weight of loneliness it once did. Because I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Jesus was with me. I could feel him, not as some distant concept or an idea I had to force myself to believe, but as something real, present, undeniable. The journey to this moment had been agonizing. I had lost my husband, my children, my friends, everything I had once held as unshakable pillars of my life. But in losing those things, I had gained something far greater. The truth. I leaned forward, flipping open the worn pages of my Bible. The weight of it in my hands felt comforting, so different from the texts I had once studied, where every word had felt like a burden, a demand for obedience, a reminder of how unworthy I was. But here, in these pages, I found freedom. I ran my fingers over the words of John 14 verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Tears welled in my eyes. How had I spent my whole life missing this? How had I been so blind to the love of the very one I had claimed to worship? I thought of the fear that had ruled me for so long. Every prayer, every fast, every act of devotion, done not from love, but from obligation. From terror. I had never truly known God. I had only known the rules meant to keep me in line. But Jesus, he had changed everything. He had stripped away the rituals, the burdens, the chains. He had shown me that God wasn't waiting to punish me, he had been waiting to love me all along. A sudden knock at the door startled me. My heart jumped. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, a flicker of fear crept in. I had received threats, messages warning me that I had gone too far, that I was an apostate, that I needed to be silenced. I took a deep breath, then slowly rose to my feet. Lord, give me strength, I whispered. With a steadying breath, I opened the door. Angela stood there, her kind eyes filled with something urgent. You need to come with me, she said quickly. Now. I frowned. What's going on? She hesitated, then glanced over her shoulder. It's happening, Layla. People are listening. But not everyone is happy about it. My stomach tightened. Angela stepped forward, lowering her voice. There are people looking for you. People who want you to stop. I swallowed hard. I had known this moment would come. The truth was dangerous. But I couldn't stay silent. I had made my choice the moment I opened my eyes in that hospital bed and spoke the name of Jesus. I had already died once. I wasn't afraid to do it again. I met Angela's gaze, my resolve unshaken. Then let them come, I said. I won't stop speaking the truth. A slow smile spread across her face. "I didn't think you would." She held out her hand. "Come on," she said. "There's someone you need to meet." I stepped forward, leaving behind the life I had once known, but not the mission Jesus had given me. And as I walked out that door, I knew I was finally free. There was a time when I thought I had all the answers. I believed my faith was strong, my devotion unwavering. But the moment I left this world, when my soul drifted beyond the veil of death, I realized I had been blind my entire life. In that place, I stood before Jesus Christ, and in an instant, everything changed. He was not just a prophet, not just a teacher, he was God. His presence was overwhelming, filled with a love so deep, so pure, that it stripped away every fear, every lie, every doubt I had ever carried. I had spent my life trying to earn God's approval, believing that strict obedience would lead to salvation. But in that moment, Jesus showed me the truth. Salvation is not something we earn. It is a gift, freely given, through His love and sacrifice. When I returned, I knew my life would never be the same. I lost my family, my friends, my entire community. But I also found something greater, a faith built on love, not fear. A relationship with the true, living God. Now, I ask you, what would you do if you were me? How would you feel if everything you once believed was shattered in the presence of undeniable truth? I urge you, don't wait for a near-death experience to seek the truth. Open your heart today. If you feel the weight of doubt, if you are searching for meaning, leave your prayer in the comments below. I will personally pray for you. And if this testimony has touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share this message so that more souls can find the light of Christ. Together, let's spread the truth. May God bless you all.